Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany and happy ktropeathon. That's right, it's July. Ktropeathon has begun. And I have decided I'm going to continue my reading vlogs. I kind of did weekly reading vlogs in June, kind of as an experiment to see what I thought of them. And so I'm continuing that into July, which I'm really excited to do because there's so many fun things for ktropeathon. So of course, you know, there's reading prompts and I'm gonna get to that in just a second, but I also have some things that I ordered for some of the life prompts, like the kbeauty tip. And I think there's also, you know, like cooking a Korean recipe and stuff. So if I'm continuing to vlog, I get to share that stuff with you as well, which is really exciting. So what am I reading this week? I am reading several things that I'm in the progress of already, but my main focus for this week's vlog is going to be to read like RM from BTS. RM is genius. He's like big brain energy and he is a humongous reader with lots of reading recommendations. So there's lots of places that I could start with reading things that he's recommended, and I actually already have read a few things that he's recommended, but there's a few things that I have chosen to focus on for this week. One of which is the book Almond, which I have on my Kindle right now. So that one I think is a little bit longer in terms of it being like, I think it's closer to 300 pages, but I don't think it's quite 300 pages. So I'm gonna focus on this one. I think RM really loved this one, and then he recommended it to other people, and I think Sugar read it, but I want to say that JK read it too, but I'm not totally sure. But multiple members of BTS have really enjoyed this one, as well as some members of some other K-pop groups. So that seemed like a great place to start. I will also be reading Demian by Hermann Hesse, and this is like the worst cover of like any book ever. I picked this up at like a thrift store or something like that, and I think I paid $1 or less for it. So I was like, whatever, we'll ignore the cover and read this. So you may already know, if you know a lot about BTS, you may know that their song and music video for Blood, Sweat, and Tears was very heavily inspired from this book. RM read this book and it kind of spurred him on to write that song, and there's a lot of callbacks to the book and references to it in the music video. My friend Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space has done actually like kind of like an analysis on this. Well, she's done an analysis on the book, but she's also done like an analysis of the music video, kind of trying to find the things that are callback to Demian because she read it last year, I think. So I will link her Blood, Sweat, and Tears video below because it's super fun, and I watched it before I'd even read the book and everything. So this is pretty short. It is less than 200 pages, 141 pages in my edition. So this will be a short read. From what I understand, this is kind of a coming of age story kind of a thing, kind of an awakening in a young man and just kind of loss of innocence. I think people can be kind of mixed on it. I don't think it's necessarily like a super pleasant read in terms of like likable characters, but I love books that tend to examine human nature, and I think this book does that. I have several other books that I am working on, some of which are Korean and some of which are not. The Memoirs of Lady Hyegyong, which I need to start, and I forgot to even mention in my TBR video, like a dork. I'm reading this with Christy and our friend Joanna, and this is actually a memoir of a crown princess of 18th century Korea. I got it for Christmas, and I'm so excited to read it. It's actually not as long as I thought it was gonna be. I thought it was gonna be like I thought it was like 500 or 600 pages. It's like 330 pages, but it is a memoir, so I do expect it to be a little bit more slow going. I haven't started it yet, hoping to start today. I have a couple other reads that I'm working through. I am almost done with Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb, which I've been working on for a little bit, a couple of weeks. I have like 150 pages left. Might finish it today, but if not, I'll finish it tomorrow. I'd love to finish it today. Today is Sunday, July 2nd, and I would be able to just start Korean reads tomorrow if I'm able to finish this one today. I was hoping to finish it in the weekend, so we'll see. And then lastly, I have started the Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas by Mikado Diasis, and this is hilarious. This is so funny so far. This is a memoir written by a ghost. It's a man who has died, and he's reflecting on his life and writing his memoir, and It's very tongue-in-cheek. It's a very like breaking the fourth wall heavy, which is something that I love in books for some reason. But yeah, I'm reading this with my friends Dia and Una, and so I'm only 30 pages in. My goal is to read like 10 chapters a day. Have not read my 10 chapters yet today, but I did read them yesterday. So hoping to finish this book in 2 weeks, so it definitely will be finished this week. It's a little breezy today, so I'm hoping that the wind is not being picked up too badly in this video. Guess we'll find out, but hopefully it's not annoying you. Anyways, I have other goals for ktropeathon, and one of them is that I really want to work on studying Korean every single day. I've really fallen off the bandwagon for that, and I really want to get back on it because I really like studying Korean, but things have been crazy and I've just had a lot going on the past whole year so far. So I really want to get into like a daily habit of studying Korean. I'm mostly going to be focusing on using drops for that because it's 5 minutes a day in that app. And that is a good way to instill a daily habit. But there are days that I would like to take more time to study more in depth and that kind of stuff. And so I will probably be doing that as well. But that would be, I think, overwhelming for me to choose to try to do that every day. I was trying to learn some of the lyrics to a BTS song with Christy and Joanna. We were trying to learn some of the words for I'm Fine, and I would like to work on that a little bit this month too, or another K-pop song that I enjoy. I just think that that would be fun, even if I just learn the chorus and then I can still sing along with all the Korean in the chorus and learn some Korean words in the process. So those are my plans. I will keep you updated as the week progresses on my thoughts on the books that I'm reading, in particular the books that I'm reading like RM. Pardon my mess behind me. I'm doing laundry. I like to sit outside and do vlog updates because then I don't have to worry about it looking like a mess. But it's really hot outside and I'm not going to sit out there and sweat. So we're doing a messy vlog update. I have been making lots of progress on all the books that I have been reading. So we'll get the non-RM book out of the way first. Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas. Not going to say much about this because I know I'm not going to finish it till next week, and I want this to mostly be a ktropeathon type of vlog, so I'm not going to include much about this. I just want to say that I'm enjoying it and I think it's really funny. I also am continuing to very slowly plug away at the Memoirs of Lady Hyegyong, and I am not super far. I'm about 25 pages in, and the reason why I'm really slogging through it is because I'm reading the introduction. And most of the time I skip introductions because they're spoilery, but this is real life, so kind of don't care if I get spoiled. And also I feel like I do not have the historical and cultural references to actually be able to get a lot of the nuance that might be in these memoirs. So I am reading the introduction, but it's a long introduction. Like we don't even get to the memoirs until page like 50-ish. So we've got like a whole big first section of the introduction, which is like 35 pages, which I'm 25 pages into. And then we have this whole big section of just like principal characters in it. That's like another like 7-ish pages, and then there's a translator's note, which is only, you know, a page and a half. I may skip the translator's note. I may skip like the notable persons section because having talked to Christy and Joanna who are reading this and who are both into the actual memoirs part, both of them said that she tends to reference people as like my brother or my husband or whatever, with like kind of like the names in parentheses. So it's a lot easier to get people and get kind of like the main players and what's going on here than it might seem otherwise. So my hope is that either today or tomorrow I can push through the rest of this introduction and actually start the memoirs. Next up, I have the actual books that I'm reading, like RM. So Demian, I have some tabs in here because it's really, really interesting. I'm on page 92 out of 140, so I am more than halfway through. This book is really, really interesting in terms of like kind of the process of almost like this coming of age kind of a thing, and the sentiments that the main character is experiencing is so relatable, I think, by any human who has been a child and then gone to an adult, and you have to wrestle through your own beliefs, and you have to wrestle through like what you think and the pains of growing up. And it's so real the way that he writes about this, and it's clear that he really had a time growing up himself and dealing with the emotions and the changes. And I read a little bit of the biography of him in the back, and he was like intended to go to school to be a minister, and then he's like, I don't know if I even believe any of that anymore. So like he had like a very stark change from childhood to adulthood, and you really see that in the main character here. So the main character, like I said, we start out with him in childhood. He's being raised by very devout parents, lives with very devout sisters, and is kind of like encountering some issues in his growing up life. And then he meets this man named Max Demian, who's actually not really a man. I guess he's a child. He's a couple years older than Sinclair, the main character, but he has this like adultness to him, and also this like feminine side to him, and he's like he's just different from like literally everyone else, and he causes Sinclair to like look at things very differently, and things that Sinclair was experiencing internally, kind of this warring of good and evil inside of him. Demian is like really kind of bringing that up to the surface by discussing things and kind of poking holes at religious things that don't make sense to him. And there's a lot of psychology in this book, especially like, I think it's analytic psychology or it's psychoanalysis. I can't remember which one it was. Who, like, how do you pronounce his name? Is it Jung or Young? Carl Jung or Young? Jung. I need to look up the pronunciation for that since I haven't. But, you know, he started out with Freudian stuff and then kind of like went off on his own. So one of those, psychoanalysis and analytic psychology, one of those is Freud and one of them is Jung or Young. So anyways, it's really heavy in that. So there's a lot of things that I really do not agree with, the conclusions that Sinclair is coming to, and the things, the how he's landing as he's grappling with those things, especially being a person where my faith means so much to me, and I did live through making my faith my own and not just riding on the coattails of my parents anymore. So I don't agree with it, but I find it a fascinating study. However, I needed a little bit of a break from it because it was getting like really heavy in my brain with all of the psychoanalysis stuff. So at that point, I ended up switching to Almond, which I started, I think, this morning actually. So anyways, so like I do love the way that he writes this though. He says, led the double life of a child who's no longer a child. My conscious self lived within the familiar and sanctioned world. It denied the new world that dawned within me. Like most parents, mine were no help with the new problems of puberty, to which no reference was ever made. All they did was take endless trouble in supporting my hopeless attempts to deny reality and to continue dwelling in a childhood world that was becoming more and more unreal. It was my own affair to come to terms with myself and to find my own way, and like most well-brought-up children, I managed it badly. Everyone goes through this crisis. For the average person, this is the point when the demands of his own life come into the sharpest conflict with his environment, when the way forward has to be sought with the bitterest means at his command. Many people experience the dying and rebirth, which is our fate, only this once during their entire life. Their childhood becomes hollow and gradually collapses. Everything they love abandons them, and they suddenly feel surrounded by the loneliness and mortal cold of the universe. Very many are caught forever in this impasse, and for the rest of their lives cling painfully to an irrevocable past, the dream of lost paradise, which is the worst and most ruthless of dreams. And I was just like, wow. Wow. I think I've gone through a dying and rebirth probably multiple times in my life, in my walk of faith. There's been many times where I've just needed to I felt like I went through this dying and rebirth. But it's really interesting that he talks about everything they love abandons them, and they suddenly feel surrounded by the loneliness and mortal cold of the universe. And it's like there's this childishness, and I remember so clearly the ages of like 11 to 14, and I would not go back to that for all the world. I would not. No matter what you gave me, I would not relive those years over again, because it's this time where you feel like you're growing up, and it's like you still, at first in those years, you still like want to play with toys, and you're like, oh, but is that childish? Like, you know, and you're grappling with like, what should I be doing? What should I not be doing? And then you start losing interest in the childish things that once were your whole world, and you feel so lost, not to mention like raging hormones in your body changing, and all of a sudden you're crying or you're angry and you don't know why. And he talks about that in here, where all of a sudden he would just be like filled with rage, and he talks about being like super lanky and just like not even looking like a regular human. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like it's just so relatable. The way that he writes about puberty is so, it's like, oh yes, these emotions and this experience is indelibly etched on my brain. Moving on to Almond. Almond, let's see, how far am I in Almond? I'm reading this on my Kindle, so I can tell you I am 30% of the way through Almond already. So I didn't really know very much about Almond before I picked it up. I knew that RM had recommended it, and several other members of BTS had gone on and read it and really enjoyed it, and didn't know much about it, really liked the cover. But it turns out it's about this young boy who he basically has no emotions. He doesn't feel emotions, and he can't really sense emotions in other people. And there's a name for it. I don't remember what it is, so I'll put it on the screen. It's not autism, it's something very specific, and he actually talks about the almonds in his brain, which is like a part of his brain that's like, I think almond shaped. That is this part of your brain that feels emotions and senses emotions in other people and can recognize it. So, you know, someone might fall down and cry, and he would just look at them and just stand there and look at them with like complete serious face, you know. And he actually, at the very beginning of this book, like as a small child, like 6 years old, he witnesses a middle schooler getting beaten to death, and he goes into a convenience store and tells someone, he's like, hey, there's someone out there and I think they're dying. And the guy's like, oh, stop it, you're being dramatic, like stop playing jokes or whatever. Like he doesn't take it seriously at all, and the kid dies, and he blames this boy because he's like, why weren't you more urgent? Why didn't you say this more seriously? Why did you act like you were joking? And he wasn't joking. He was just incapable of actually putting any emotion or urgency into those things. So his mother and his grandmother make him like these flashcards of kind of like, this is what you're supposed to do in this situation, because he feels no fear. So they're like, hey, if a car's coming, get out of the way, because you have no self-preservation instinct. If someone is acting this way, this is what you should say. This is how you should respond to these things. And so it's really kind of like the process of him growing up and stuff. And I loved the prologue of this book. I'm going to read it to you because it's super brief. And he says, I won't tell you whether it has a happy ending or a tragic ending, because first of all, every story becomes boring once the ending is spoiled. Second of all, not telling you will make you more engaged in this one. Lastly, and I know it sounds like an excuse, but neither you nor I nor anyone can ever really know whether a story is happy or tragic. And so like it immediately like pulled me in, and I felt that way with Demian too. I feel like the books that I'm reading right now like are immediately like sucking me in, even though they are heavier. I think that Almond is actually pretty fast-paced, honestly, for me to have gotten through so much of it so quickly. It's like very readable, it's very gripping. I'm really enjoying it, even though parts of it are very difficult to read. And I also love how this book talks about books because his mother owns a used bookstore, and that has been like one of her dreams. And she actually talks about how she could never write her own books, even though that was originally her dream, because she doesn't want to sell her life by actually like writing about her life. And he talks about how he felt connected to books, but not like in an emotional way, because he doesn't feel emotions, right? And he said, to be more specific, I felt connected to the smell of old books. The first time I smelled them, it was as if I'd encountered something I already knew. I would open the books and smell them whenever I could, while Granny nagged me, asking what the point of smelling musty books was. Books took me to places I could never go otherwise. They shared confessions of people I'd never met and lives I'd never witnessed. The emotions I could never feel and the events I hadn't experienced could all be found in these volumes. And then he talks about how when you're watching a TV show, all the blanks are filled in for you, and how you can sit there and you're watching it, and you know, a sentence in a book might say, a blonde lady sits cross-legged on a brown cushion in a hexagon-shaped house. And so that's there, but when they talk about the visual adaptation, you know, they have, you know, what her expression would be, the clothes that she's wearing, the color of the walls, and like all these different things that might not be details that are included in the book. And he said, but books were different. They had lots of blanks between words and even between lines. I could squeeze myself in there and sit or walk or scribble down my thoughts. It didn't matter if I had no idea what the words meant. Turning the pages was half the battle. And I just am loving the way that this is phrased, and I'm just really, really enjoying it a lot. I also found out, I was looking for manga that RM or other BTS members may have recommended, and I found out, I was talking more about the anime show, but I think that it would also apply to the manga. I'm taking it a little loosely. Attack on Titan, apparently. I have the first four volumes of this because I'm borrowing it from a friend, so I may try the first volume of this week also. In terms of some other things for ktropeathon, one of the things was to cook a Korean meal, which you have seen the clips. I've already done 2 of those this week. I've made mayak eggs, and I've also made pork belly. The pork belly was like in the air fryer, and it was so easy and so good. So I'll make sure to link both of those recipes down below for you, because they're both really, really easy and they were both really delicious. But I also ordered a cookbook, Korean Cooking Favorites. And this is by Hyegyong, who is the author of one of my favorite food blogs, which is Beyond Kimchi. And this looks amazing, and I'm so excited to try some more recipes in this. In my next clip of B-roll, I am going to put kind of like a flip through so you can see some of the pictures, but I'll share more with you because I'm planning to cook from this some next week. I got this after I'd already been grocery shopping. So I think I'm almost done with the Korean recipes that I'll make this week. And then lastly, for the kbeauty prompt, I was really excited because I got an Amazon gift card, and this is not something I would have bought otherwise. I'm not a big makeup person, and some of the kbeauty stuff is actually like skincare and stuff, but I was really, really excited because I found this Korean lip oil. I am so not an influencer. Can you tell? Especially a beauty influencer. Can you even see that? I don't know if you can. Trying to make it focus, and I don't think it is. Anyways, it's Noonie lip oil, and I got the apple wine because it's one of the darkest ones, and I've heard that this is like really, really sheer. So I'm not a huge makeup person, as you can probably tell, but the only makeup that I actually enjoy is usually like lipstick or lip gloss, and then mascara is like the only makeup that I wear on any sort of consistent basis. So I have not even opened this yet. So there it is. It's so pretty. Noonie. So I'm gonna put it on in this video like a cool influencer, which I am not. We'll pretend that I'm really, really cool. So let's see what this looks like. It just looks like a regular thing, but oh yeah, that's really light, so I'm glad I went with a darker color. It smells so good. It definitely smells appley, and it smells kind of floral. Oh, I love the color of this so much. It's a little darker than I thought it was going to be on me personally. But the other ones looked more pinky, and I tend to prefer kind of like cooler toned and pink can be kind of warmer toned. So it usually looks better on me to do cooler toned things. I really like this a lot. So apparently once the gloss part wears off, there should be a tint that stays. So I'll keep you updated on that, whether or not it does. It doesn't feel as sticky as lip gloss can, and part of the reason I wanted to get this is because since it's lip oil instead of lip gloss, it's supposed to be much more moisturizing, because that's something that I don't like about a lot of lipsticks and even lip glosses, is that they don't feel like they feel like they dry out my lips, and my lips can be really dry anyway. So I like the color a lot, and I'm really happy that I went with this one. Maybe I'll get some more colors at some point. Anyways, if you're interested, I will link both like the cookbook and the lip oil down below, so I can really be like a cool influencer. But I figured since I'm sharing stuff other than books, I will link all the things that I am mentioning. But anyways, I will give you more updates on what I'm reading. I'm sure that there will be at least one more update to wrap this up. Hopefully at the end of this, I intend to be finished with Demian and Almond, and hopefully have read Attack on Titan as well. Hello, so by way of a lip update, this is after eating, so it definitely has a tint that stays. I put a little bit of chapstick over it, but the chapstick doesn't have color, so if it looks a little shiny, it's because there is some chapstick on it. So the lip tint definitely works. I feel like it dried brighter than it went on. It was like a brighter red than this, even like before I ate. Probably should have done an update then, but I didn't. But in case you're curious, it does stay tinted. right, hello. It's Friday, so I have a final update for you. It's been a really crazy day today, so I'm hoping my thoughts are coherent. I'm very tired. We're having an event at our church tomorrow, and there was a lot of prep required today. And so, yeah, so I have actually finished 4 books this week, which is amazing. 3 of which I started and finished. One is a manga, which makes it less amazing, but let's just talk about the books that I completed. So let's start with the RM books first. I will have timestamps in the description because one of these books is not related to my reading like RM at all. So if you want to skip over that one whenever we get to that, you can do that. But first, let's talk about Almond. So I finished Almond. I talked about it in my last vlog, and I ended up really, really enjoying this book. It was kind of feeling a lot like a downer which I found that a lot of Korean books are, for whatever reason, like Korean books that end up being translated into English. I find a lot of them to be kind of literary in nature and more like reflective and sad. And this one kind of feels that way as well. It also kind of feels a little bit YA-y, not in romance ways, but just because the main character is young and is high school aged, so you're getting his perspective. So it just feels younger in that sense, and I really loved it. I felt like it really examined like what does it mean to be human, what does it mean to like feel things, and like just I don't know. I just felt like it was a really good examination of emotion and love and what it means to be human and all those kinds of things. I will just, as a forewarning, put a little disclosure here that one of the characters in this book swears a lot. Like a lot, like a lot more than I would normally read. But I do feel like it makes sense for the character because he's someone that's trying to come off as like really edgy and bad, and everyone thinks he's bad, so he's acting that way, kind of stepping into what he believes everyone sees him as. And the main character actually talks to this person at one point, and he says, by the way, you seem to have a limited vocabulary. Most of them are swear words, but they are also limited. Reading books will help you expand your vocabulary, then you can have better conversations with people. I just really liked that. There were some moments that definitely made me smile or laugh in this story, but there were also just some very tragic moments, some moments that were like really intense and visceral, especially, and there's some violence that's happening in it, and it just feels like very intense and very detailed at times. But then there were just some really insightful things too, which I love this. So this is coming from the character who can't sense other people's emotions and doesn't have any of his own. And he says in reflection, from what I understood, love was an extreme idea, a word that seemed to force something undefinable into the prison of letters. But the word was used so easily, so often. People spoke of love so casually just to mean the slightest pleasure or thanks. It's just a lot of really good lines in here. I really liked this one a lot. Probably maybe one of my favorite Korean books that I've read so far. Next up, let's talk about Demian. I don't know what to tell you about this book. I liked it in the beginning, despite the fact that the characters are super unlikable. The title character is like really weird, and the relationship that he has with Sinclair, who's the narrator of this, is also really weird. But there was something about it that was compelling and gripping to me, despite it being, you know, philosophical and kind of examining different psychological things and just talking about, you know, someone who's growing up and isn't so sure about their faith and isn't so sure about certain things and exploring different ideas and all that kind of stuff. And I could already tell I wasn't going to agree with where the author landed on these things, but I was still like along for the ride and was enjoying it. And for some reason it was really reminding me of a separate piece. And I was trying to figure out why, because that book is not really that similar, but it also has very unlikable characters and revisiting things from the perspective of like the narrator's youth. And so I think that those are the similarities, and the fact that it is kind of reviewing school-aged kind of things and boarding school type stuff, like those are components in this story as well. So I'm thinking maybe that is what I liked about it. But then it gets weirder and weirder and just more and more out there. And like I said, I'm not familiar with the type of like analytic psychology or psychoanalysis, I don't remember which one it is, that this book explores, but I really didn't like it. I felt like it went from being like a component along with growing up to like the entirety of this story. It took over it, and not in a good way. Like, it felt very jargon based for a while, just talking about him finding his true self and worshiping this god, false god called Abraxas or whatever, that's made up and is a god that exemplifies like both the goodness of the real God and also the evilness of Satan, because those are components in every single person. So we should embrace good and evil, because both of them reside within us, and we won't actually be able to fully know ourselves or fully come into who we're really supposed to be without that. But then it goes into like weird stuff of him like having this weird crush like relationship with the title character and his mom, and it's weird. And there's this like thing where he's like, oh, if I think about something hard enough and I just make it like consume me, like I can summon someone and they will come to me. And like, it's just weird. It got really, really weird, and it was never normal. So I don't know what to say. Like, I was like, oh, this is for sure gonna be, you know, like 3 or 4 stars based on like when I was reading it. I was like, I don't know if I'd reread it, but there's some things about it I like, and it's compelling me nonetheless. I had to force myself to finish this book towards the end, and I just wasn't enjoying it. I didn't enjoy where he landed, which I don't have to agree with an author to appreciate what they're trying to do, to enjoy their writing, to enjoy their characters. The characters were atrocious. I don't get all the psychoanalysis stuff that's in here. I just don't get it. I can't wrap my mind around it. And it went so far beyond like the realms of normal psychology, and made it also spiritual at the same time, but in a really weird way that doesn't coincide with like any religion. And it was just weird. I ended up really not liking it. Right now it's feeling like a 2-star. Maybe I'll bump it up to 3, but it's just weird. It just became less enjoyable and more heavy-handed in like this weird psychology slash somehow making that more spiritual than it is kind of a way. And there is no subtlety in this book, in my opinion. I just really didn't enjoy it. The last book that I read like RM was Attack on Titan Volume 1. I don't know what I think of this one, honestly. I would say that out of the books that I read, like RM, Almond is for sure my favorite. I really liked it. This, like, I did like it. And I think I'm going to continue because, like I said, I'm borrowing the first 4 volumes from a friend. And so I'm going to at least read Volume 2. But, you know, I should have known from the cover. I was just like, oh, that cover is kind of creepy. And, like, this is the least creepy of the Titans, so I don't know what's up with that. So anyways, the premise of Attack on Titan is that humanity long ago were attacked by these huge humanoid type beings called Titans, and they eat humans. And so they built this 3-walled city. So there's like a center of a city, and then there's more, and they built another wall, and then there's more, and then they built another wall. So they're living in like the outer edges, but they're able to retreat back into the walls. And none of the Titans are even close to 50 feet tall, but they built these 50 feet tall really strong walls. And towards the beginning of the book, there is an over 50-foot tall Titan who they're calling Colossus, who is able to break through the wall, and then other Titans follow into this hole that he's broken into and start eating people. And it's so creepy, like the pages where they're eating people, it's just like, I'm like, oh. And looking at the back, I thought that this was just like an action story, and it says a visceral and fantastical intense action horror story, Japan's equivalent of The Walking Dead. And I'm like, oh, okay, this might be too much for me. I don't know. And part of my issue is that I go into manga with like this mindset of something that's a good like palate cleanser in between more intense or more difficult books, because I've read like The Apothecary Diaries and Spy Family, and both of those have a lot of humor, and they're quirky and they're fun, and this is not. So it's just different than what I was expecting. I think I still liked it. I did like it, and I think it's well done. So I am going to continue, and I think it's going to be a little bit different going forward, because now I know what to expect, and I know that it's supposed to at least partially fall into a horror genre, and I did not know that when I started. So it's just a little different than I expected. And lastly, I'm going to talk about the book that I read that is not like RM, that I finished. I was almost done with it at the beginning of the week, but I can't not talk about Assassin's Quest. I don't want to wait a whole nother week to talk about it in another reading vlog. So loved this. Struggled a lot with the first like half of it because it was just like very slow going, and like I've said in multiple reading vlogs, Fitz is by himself for a good chunk of the beginning of the book. So I was missing Night Eyes, I was missing Burke, I was missing Molly, I was missing the Fool, I was missing Ketterkin and Verity, and I'm missing all these people that I'm just not seeing. And so I kept going and it did get better, and he got back with some of the same people, and so that was really nice. But you know, there's a quest element in this that is also very prolonged, and some people say it gets kind of redundant and repetitive, and I didn't so much feel that way. I really didn't. I was very much enjoying it at that point, but it still just was a slower read for me in general, and lots of people say that about this one, so I totally get it. But I still felt like it had a good resolution. I've also seen some people say that they felt like it was resolved too quickly, that we had this big long quest and this build up, and then everything resolves in 2 chapters, and they felt like it was too quick of a wrapping up of what was going on. I was satisfied with it. I liked it. I mean, it left me wanting more, and there were a lot of questions that were unanswered, but you know what? There is more. This is the first trilogy in like, what, a 16-book series with all the series and trilogies combined? I mean, really, it's fine. There's more, and I will learn more, and I'm really looking forward to continuing with this. It definitely made me sad at the end, because Robin Hobb does that to me, where I just want to stare at a wall and just be like, devastated. So that, I mean, every single one of her books has done that to me. The only one that's made me sob is Assassin's Apprentice, and if you've read it, you know why. I'm not gonna tell you why, but there was just some really beautiful reflective things in here as well. And there was one quote towards the very end which is not spoilery, and I'm gonna read it for you. So this is, like I said, at the very end, and there's been some sad moments, and Fitz says, "I healed, not completely. A scar is never the same as good flesh, but it stops the bleeding." And I'm like, oh, Fitz, you've been through so much. Some people also said they thought he was too whiny in this book, and I'm like, dude, he has every right to whine. So I can't get enough of Robin Hobb, and I want to continue. I'm still like, I'm struggling a little bit, because I know that Live Ship Traders is next, and I know that there are some very brutal and difficult scenes in those books. Not that the Farseer trilogy was not brutal, but I know that there is some specific things that I really struggle with and try not to read that are in that trilogy. So I'm a little nervous to pick those up, as opposed to, you know, some other future series. Like, I'm pretty sure Tawny Man comes after that, and we're returning to Fitz and stuff, and we're not in Live Ships. That's like very separate. It's the same world, and there are, I think, important things that you need to know before you continue with Tawny Man. But I just know that there's some assault scenes in there, which are things that I don't like to read. So I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do. But I really love Robin Hobb, and I really don't want to be done with this world. So I'll keep you posted on what I end up deciding. There is a fly. I don't know if you can hear it or see it, but I just figured I'd mention that in case it's really, really buzzy. But anyways, those are the books that I finished this week. I started and finished 3 of them, which sounds amazing, but you know, manga's really short. Demian was pretty short. Almond was less than 300 pages, but I think it was like 260 or 270, something like that. And I finally finished the Farseer trilogy, which is one of the main series that I wanted to complete this year, was that one and Stormlight, and I really want to get back to the Gentleman Bastard series as well. Those are like the 3 that I'm like, I really want to get caught up in those. So I have finished the Farseer trilogy, so I'm really excited about that. I hope you have enjoyed this slightly niche vlog, since I was, you know, reading Light Namjoon for a week. But I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below if you've read any of these books or any other books that RM has recommended. I'd love to hear about that. And I just love to hear in general, what have you been reading lately? Tell me all about it. Tell me whether you're liking it, whether you're hating it, what your thoughts are. Give me all the thoughts. I want to know. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.